everyone, how are you? I'm really sorry I couldn't give you an actual time for today, but you know what it's like with kids at home. So I've got one child who's just off to the hospital for an x-ray because she thinks she may have done something to her elbow. I've got two others under house arrest in their bedroom with lunch, and hopefully they will stay in there without making too much noise. But you know what a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old can be like, so fingers crossed. Anyway, so today I wanted to talk about sitting, because we've done a lot about standing and thinking about our posture with our standing. So thinking about going tall, so it's not back like this and like a military style, but by sort of pushing down a little bit and using the crown of your head or your ponytail and pushing yourself up, just so that you can stop that anterior pelvic tilt, which a lot of people have with that arch of the back, but you also don't want to over tilt it as well, because both of those put pressure on your abdominal. But what's really killing us these days is sitting. I don't know about you, but I might end up sitting with working at my computer, watching TV. It could be 8 or more hours a day. And the posture that you sit in, especially at that amount of time, is really going to impact on your whole posture and on your abdominal wall. So think about it. When you're sitting, if you're hunched over at a keyboard like this, you're getting that kyphosis sort of curve in your back. You're putting pressure on your abdominal wall. Your head's going forward, which is putting excess pressure on your neck because it makes it heavier for you. And there's so many problems that happen because of this. And not just with your diastasis. This is for everyone. I mean, think about what our ancestors or the hunters and gatherers, our body is not made for sitting in a chair. It's made for squatting, it's made for standing, it's made for sitting on the ground, but it's not really made for sitting in a chair. So I want to give you a couple of tips, because most of us sit a lot of the day. So when you're sitting, and hopefully you can see, most of us kind of, sit like this, especially if we're at a computer. We're kind of like this all day, or maybe we're like this, or maybe you're like me and you sit cross-legged, or maybe you cross one leg, maybe you're like this. However you sit, and what you do long-term is going to impact on, if you cross your leg, you're likely to end up a little bit twisted, which can cause issues. If you're hunched forward, that's got that whole rotated shoulder going on, which puts that pressure. So what you're looking for when you're sitting, and this is the cue and how you can understand if you're sitting properly, is if you feel in here, you've got 2 sit bones, and they're called sit bones for a reason, because they're what you sit on. So what you want to do is make sure that you don't slouch against the chair. If you're short like me, unless you have an adjustable chair, you probably can't use the back. Your feet should be on the ground, and you probably can't tell. Mine are slightly low because they're not quite at a 90-degree angle in this chair. And if you're in a workspace that's like that, you might want to try and get a box or something to put your feet on so that your knee and hip are aligned at that 90-degree angle. Now, your sit bones, you should be able to feel them, and you may need to kind of, spread apart a little bit to get them, and wiggle around until you find that you can feel them. And what you want to do is you want the pressure of your body weight on both of those bones evenly. So if you're twisting, you'll be on one bone and not the other, and you're kind of like, I don't know, if you slouch to one side, or let's just say you're on the phone and you put the phone on your ear like this and you kind of slouch to one side, you're not going to be on both evenly. So Make sure you're squidging. Make sure both are on evenly. And what that's going to do is it's going to put your pelvis in the correct position for your back to have its natural curve. Okay, so remember the back has those 4 curves that are natural that you should try to keep in everything you do. So when you're sitting, if you're on both sit bones evenly, your feet are flat on the ground, and you're not hunched, which you can't if you're on both evenly, you're going to be in a good position, okay? So no extra pressure on your abdominal wall, no hunching. Now, if you're doing this with me and you're sitting, now try and do what most people do, and that's rock back onto their tailbone, okay? So if you're back on your tailbone, if you're like me, your feet raise off the ground because you're too short for the chair, but you can see I'm starting to get that curve in my back, that kyphosis sort of curve at the upper back. Now think about what would happen if I've got a computer screen and I'm trying to work. Alright, so now I'm in this position. So I've rocked back onto my tailbone and I'm working really hard. So look at what's happening here. I've got all this pressure going on here. I'm rounding my shoulders, so my shoulders are coming forward. I'm likely to get that forward head syndrome. And I've got all this pressure going on my abdominal wall, which is not going to help anybody with diastasis. So, remember, flick it back. Now, what happens if you go the other way? So a lot of people have an anterior pelvic tilt, and what will happen is they may sit forward so that their back arches. So they're pushing that way and their back's arching, and they're sitting up straight for sure, but that excess arch on your back, what that's doing is it's putting a lot of pressure on your lower back. So when you stand up, you might be like, oh, you're not so sore. And you're also pushing against your abdominal wall. So your diastasis isn't going to heal at all. So remember, feet flat, even if you like sitting on the edge of your chair, and the edge of your chair is not a bad place to sit. Feet flat, both sit bones evenly, and you're going to be great like that, okay? Now, there's a few other things about this, but what I want to do is I want to give you a couple of tips. If you have the tendency, like me, to slouch when you're here and go like this, what I like to do is I have this towel here that's rolled up, and I actually put it just sort of on the edge of my chair there. And what I tend to do is I sit so that my sit bone's there, but the towel's just tucked about where my tailbone would be. So what that does is every time I kind of go to do this, I'm like, oh, can't do that. Oh, no, that's uncomfortable. So it's kind of like that memory jogger. And this is really important if you are currently pregnant. This is a perfect thing to have, is just a little bit of a rise there, because it will help keep you in a good position with your pregnancy. Because when you're pregnant and you're really belly heavy, you've got a really bad tendency to do this. So this is really going to help if you're pregnant to keep everything in line. But I find it really helps me anyway. So I keep that there. If you are an archer, that's not going to help you because it's kind of going to force you into the position that you're used to having. So that's not going to help so much. So don't necessarily use that if you're an archer. So that you'll just need to kind of keep thinking about your position for that one. Okay, so that's one thing. So we've got our sit bones. And whilst we're here, I want to go through a little bit more about that TVA breathing that we've been doing all of last week. Because once you've got it on the ground, the next point of doing your TVA breathing is going to be sitting up. So from here, I suggest, like if you're in an office, you have an alarm that goes off maybe every hour, every couple of hours, and you can do a set of them right standing there. So you would get into the right position, put your hands kind of down into that area and breathe out. Hold and relax. And just getting a set of 10 in every so often is fantastic. And from here, you could also try, if the hissing of the the snake doesn't work for you, you can try the drawstring bag. So that's your tailbone, or thinking about your tailbone or your cortex going up towards your pubic bone, and then your hip bone's drawing in like a bag, a drawstring bag. So it's without moving though, which is why I find this one a hard way to do it. But if you think about it, it's coming in and pulling up and together. And that will also engage your TVAs. So this is a great place to practice. Standing's even harder, but if you sit all day, practice your TVAs whilst you're sitting. Right, so now we're also sitting all day, but you know what also this does? Especially when you're sitting in good posture, people have a really bad tendency of being, when they're going into good posture, is being tight. And they're like, oh, and then they stand up and they're like, oh, sore neck, oh, sore hips, sore back. Because you're tense all the time. So what I also want you to think about doing is once an hour, you should stand up, give yourself a bit of a stretch. But also what I want you to do is switch all the way back, for one thing. And I want you to, you don't even need to sit about good posture, just sit back, try and keep that back straight. But what I want you to do is I want you to grab your hands, and I want you to feel your hip flexors. So dig in. If they're tight, which they might be if you're sitting all day, I want you to really consciously try to relax them. It should feel squishy, okay? Soft and squishy, not tight. So just relax. Even give them a little bit of a massage down there just to try and loosen them up a little bit. And try to relax your legs. You may even want to drop to sitting right at the front and drop one leg down. Just give it a little bit of a stretch out. And the other leg down, give that a little bit of a stretch out down in your hip flexor. Because when we're sitting, our hip flexors are actually caught in this midway point. And with them being in this midway point, they're holding up our body weight. So they're holding up our torso. And think about your bicep. So if you had your arm in this position, and let's just say you're holding your purse all day like this, and after 8 hours of doing that, can you imagine what your bicep and your elbow and everything would be like, and how hard it would be to straighten your arm again, and how tired and tight your arm would feel? So that's your hip flexors. They're in that sort of contracted halfway position and holding up your body weight. So if you're tense in there for 8 hours, holding up your body weight like that, it's going to hurt you. So, and with the diastasis, I know you hear me say this all the time. Look like you've got tight hip flexors. Look like you've got tight hip flexors. Look like you got tight hip flexors. It's probably because most of us do. We sit all day, they're tight. The tightness of your hip flexors causes that anterior pelvic tilt going on. That causes pressure onto our belly. And even without diastasis, that's going to push your belly out. So a lot of people are in our group, and if you're not in our workout group, I'll post the link below, because you're welcome to join. But a lot of people in our groups like, my diastasis is, I'm firm and I really have only a minimal gap, maybe one finger, but I still have this belly. Well, it's because you stand and sit all day and you tight hip flexors and they're pushing your belly out. So So if you need to stretch your hip flexors, because that lessens that pelvic tilt. Now remember, you don't want it to go under because that's putting pressure on your pelvic floor, but you want that natural curve. So if you've got a really big curve and your butt sticks out like that, then you're putting pressure on here, and that's going to keep your belly out. You're not going to get a flat belly if you've got this. So you need to, remember, push it down, stand tall, pull in your TVA, so use that, and that will actually start flattening out your stomach. It will also help you repair your diastasis. So hip flexors, remember, every so often come forward, stretch them out one leg at a time. Okay, come all the way back, check. Am I loose? Am I floppy in here? Make sure I relax. Move your position often, and if you can, now I know that this might be a little hard if you're in an office situation, especially if you're in a dress, but if you can, jump up onto your chair and sit in a squat, okay, like this. So if you can actually do your work like this, it is going to be so much more beneficial to you because your hip flexors are actually at a resting position. So if you're here, your hip flexors aren't engaged at all, they're not contracted, they're at a full rest position. So you're stretching them out, and you will find that having sat like this for a while, when you stand up, your back will feel better, your hips will feel better, you won't have as much tension in your body, and it's just a fantastic way. Now, I am so tight in the back of my legs and my Achilles, I physically can't at this point. I'm getting better, I can at least get into the position now, but I can't put my feet flat on the ground. So I use that handy little towel roll I showed you before, and I put it under my heels so that it's not quite as hard on me. So that's what I do. If you can get away with this, if you can't in an office, why don't you sit like this when you watch TV? Note that my back is still in its natural position. I'm not hunched over like this, and I'm not like slouched in like this. I'm in that good full squat position. I don't recommend it if you've got really bad knees, you know, and also don't go and sit in here for like an hour or two at a time. Build up to it, but as you get used to it, it's really going to be beneficial for so many parts of your body, but especially beneficial for your hip flexors, which is what we want to do. All right, last thing, and I'll be really quick because I don't want to waste too many people's time. When you're sitting and you are in an office, try to get everything set up so that your arms are at a 90-degree angle. You may need a wrist rest for if you type at a keyboard or an adjustable keyboard, because you don't want your wrists to be flexed or down like this. You want everything to be nice and in line. And the other thing that's really important is your monitor, okay? You don't want to be looking down at it, and you don't want to be looking up at it. So think about the monitor height. And also your keyboard shouldn't be too far away from you. So don't have it so that you have to reach forward. Okay, see what happened to me? I'm off my sit bones, I'm slouching forward. So keyboard close, everything at a 90-degree angle. Get your sit bones so that they're evenly done. Feet flat on the floor, on a little box if you need to. And remember, every hour, give yourself a little bit of a jiggle and a move. Think about stretching out those hip flexors each time, and even just moving how you're sitting. And sit back and test, see whether you're nice and squishy. Okay, so I really hope that that helped. And if you do have any questions, post them below and I will answer them a bit later. Okay, thanks very much. Catch ya.